Picture this. You're in a heated debate with someone. The evidence is overwhelming. They're wrong. Dead wrong. But instead of admitting it, they double down, twist facts, attack your character, do anything but say those three simple words. I was wrong. Here's the shocking truth. This isn't strength. It's the most glaring sign of intellectual weakness there is. And before you nod along thinking about someone else, pause. Because the real question is, when was the last time you genuinely admitted you were wrong about something important? Today, we're diving deep into why the inability to admit mistakes isn't just annoying. It's a psychological prison that's destroying careers, relationships, and even entire societies. But more importantly, I'll show you how breaking free from this trap can transform your mind in ways you never imagined. Part 1, the ego protection racket. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Your brain is wired to protect your ego at all costs. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, that mental discomfort you feel when reality clashes with your beliefs. Here's what happens in your brain when you're confronted with being wrong. 1. The amygdala hijack. Your emotional brain treats being wrong as a threat. It literally triggers the same fight or flight response as physical danger. 2. The confirmation bias loop. Your brain immediately starts hunting for any shred of evidence that you might be right, ignoring mountains of proof to the contrary. 3. The backfire effect. Studies by researchers like Brendan Nyhan at Dartmouth show that when presented with corrective information, people often become more entrenched in their false beliefs. Think about it. Have you ever watched someone twist themselves into mental pretzels to avoid admitting a mistake? That's not stupidity. It's your brain's defense mechanism on overdrive. The brilliant psychologist Dweck discovered something fascinating. People with a fixed mindset see being wrong as a permanent stain on their identity. If I'm wrong about this, I'm a failure. But those with a growth mindset see mistakes as data, valuable information for improvement. But here's where it gets really dark. When this ego protection becomes chronic, it doesn't just make you annoying at parties. It fundamentally weakens your ability to think, learn, and grow. And nowhere is this more devastating than in our closest relationships. Part 2, the relationship destroyer. John Gottman, one of the world's leading relationship researchers, can predict divorce with 91% accuracy. One of his biggest red flags? When partners can't admit fault during conflicts. Here's the brutal psychology of what happens. The defensiveness spiral. When you can't say I was wrong, your partner feels unheard. They push harder, you defend harder, the conflict escalates until the original issue is buried under layers of resentment. Trust erosion. Every time you refuse to admit obvious mistakes, you're essentially gaslighting your partner. They start questioning their own perception of reality. The contempt buildup. Gottman calls contempt the sulfuric acid of relationships. Nothing breeds contempt faster than a partner who never takes responsibility. I once coached an executive, let's call him Mark, whose marriage was falling apart. His wife's complaint? He's never wrong about anything. Mark insisted he was just logical and factual. But here's what was really happening. Mark's inability to admit mistakes wasn't strength. It was deep insecurity masquerading as confidence. His ego was so fragile that admitting any flaw felt like admitting he was worthless. The tragic irony? By trying to appear strong and infallible, Mark was revealing the ultimate weakness, a mind too frightened to grow. But relationships are just the beginning. When this mindset infiltrates your professional life, the consequences can be catastrophic. Part 3. The career killer you don't see coming. In 2001, Enron, once America's 7th largest company, collapsed in one of the biggest corporate scandals in history. The root cause? A culture where admitting mistakes was seen as weakness. Jeff Skilling, Enron's CEO, created what researchers call a narcissistic culture where being wrong was career suicide. Employees hid losses, fabricated profits, and built elaborate lies rather than admit errors. The result? Complete destruction. But you don't need to run a Fortune 500 company to suffer from this. Studies by Amy Edmondson at Harvard show that in psychologically safe teams, where people can admit mistakes without fear, performance increases by up to 47%. Why? 3 reasons. 1. Rapid learning. When you admit mistakes quickly, you correct course faster. Teams that can say, "we were wrong," pivot, while others are still defending dead-end strategies. 2. Trust building. Counterintuitively, leaders who admit mistakes are rated as more competent, not less. Vulnerability signals strength, not weakness. 3. Innovation acceleration. The best ideas come from learning what doesn't work. If you can't admit failure, you can't innovate. The tech giant Microsoft learned this the hard way. Under Steve Ballmer's leadership, the culture punished admitting mistakes. Result, they missed mobile, cloud computing, and social media. When Satya Nadella took over and created a learn-it-all culture, instead of a know-it-all culture, Microsoft's value increased by over $2 trillion. So we've seen how this destroys relationships and careers. But here's the million-dollar question. If admitting mistakes is so valuable, why is it so impossibly hard? The answer lies deep in our evolutionary psychology. Here's the evolutionary trap. For our ancestors, being wrong about which berries were poisonous meant death. Being cast out from the tribe for incompetence meant death. Our brains evolved to treat being wrong as an existential threat. But here's what separates strong minds from weak ones in the modern world: the ability to override this ancient programming. Here are 4 evidence-based strategies to build this mental strength. 1. The pre-commitment strategy. Before entering any debate or decision, tell yourself, I might be wrong about this, and that's okay. Research shows this pre-commitment reduces defensive reactions by up to 60%. 2. The third-person technique. When you feel defensive, ask, what would a wise friend advise me here? This psychological distance helps you see past your ego's smokescreen. 3. The growth reframe. Instead of, I was wrong, which feels like failure, try, I just learned something new. This activates your brain's reward centers instead of threat centers. 4. The compound effect. Start small. Admit tiny mistakes daily. I was wrong about the weather. I misremembered that date. Build your tolerance gradually. Your ego is like a muscle. It needs progressive training. Remember what the philosopher Bertrand Russell said. The fundamental cause of trouble in the world is that the stupid are cocksure, while the intelligent are full of doubt. Here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you can genuinely say I was wrong is the moment you become intellectually stronger than 90% of people. We've explored how the inability to admit mistakes hijacks your brain's learning systems, destroys your closest relationship, sabotages your career potential, keeps you trapped in weak thinking patterns. But here's the transformative truth. Every time you say I was wrong, you're not showing weakness. You're displaying the ultimate intellectual strength. You're saying, my commitment to truth is stronger than my ego. The question isn't whether you'll be wrong, you will be, repeatedly. The question is, will you have the strength to admit it? Here's my challenge. In the comments below, share one thing you were wrong about recently. Notice how it feels. Notice how others respond. You might just discover that admitting mistakes doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable. Remember, the weak mind says, I'm never wrong. The strong mind says, I can't wait to discover what I'm wrong about next.